Hey everybody, this is Rick Uzzi. Welcome to Tech Tuesday. Today the topic is broadband news, the latest broadband news for broadband service providers. I will be right back. Hey, thanks for joining me today for Tech Tuesday. Again, today's topic, broadband news, but I wanted to give you a heads up for next week. If you are a cable provider and you are interested in DOCSIS proactive network maintenance, DOCSIS P&M as it's known, then make sure you tune in next week, and I think probably 1 or 2 weeks after that, because I'm going to be talking about our latest version of our DOCSIS P&M tool pre-acquisition analyzer that is going to be coming out. So people will be upgrading to that, and I'm going to be going through that and talking about some of the changes, some very exciting stuff that's in that application. So make sure you tune in next week if that's of interest to you. But as I mentioned today, we are talking about latest broadband news. If you have any comments, feel free to make those in the chat window in YouTube, and feel free to comment, or if you have any questions on that while we're going through this. So first, this is just announced. So the FCC has detailed their $1.9 billion program to rip out Huawei and ZTE gear in the US. So these Chinese manufacturers, Huawei, ZTE, have been banned from the US due to some security concerns as to whether they could be collecting sensitive information, and of course the ties of Chinese companies to the Chinese Communist Party, those kinds of things. So that equipment's been banned, and for those operators that have had it, they've like, well, what do we do with this? So there is now this rip and replace plan that's come out. Carriers with under 10 million customers, as well as some schools, libraries, and healthcare providers, can apply for FCC funding to dispose of Chinese vendor network equipment starting on October 29th. So this is, for the purpose of the program, equipment would need to be capable of speeds of 200 kilobits per second in either direction. So I'm assuming this means what you would be replacing with. So they want to make sure that anything that is ripped out is replaced with something that provides at least 200K. 200K, that must be, that's weird. I don't know if that's 200 kilobits per second or that's supposed to be megabits per second. Maybe they're talking about the stuff that's coming out. I don't know. The reimbursement program will reimburse eligible providers of advanced communication services for costs reasonably incurred for the removal, replacement, and disposal of their Huawei and ZTE equipment and services obtained on or before June 30th, 2020. So you had to have gotten this before June 30th, 2020, and basically you wouldn't want to be putting this gear in after there was a ban on it. So can't have put it in later than that. RRD costs, I'm assuming that's rip, replace, dispose of costs incurred prior to April 17, 2018 will not be reimbursable. So that's kind of your window there as to when this gear was put in. It says ripping out an older mobile network to be replaced by LTE or 5G ready equipment would be allowed. Those receiving the funds will not be able to replace microwave backhaul or fixed wireless links with fiber links. Applicants for the funds will be able to claim vendor travel expenses and salary costs of internal employees dedicated purely to the replacement program. And it says the window for applying runs from October 29th to January 14th, with successful applicants expected to be informed in early Q2 2022. So if you have this gear in your network, you can, starting on October 29th, apply to get that replaced. I think it says here there's a link here in this article which will take you to this particular FCC document where you've got your public notice on this, so you can see here the title. And sorry I don't have all, you can see the links up in here, but obviously you can Google some of these things and find them if it's something that you're interested in right there. So next story, U.S. Treasury favors fiber in guidance for $10 billion capital projects fund. So this is related to the American Rescue Plan Act of 2021. U.S. government issued guidance detailing how states should use money from a $10 billion capital projects fund created earlier this year, and the news is all good for fiber. And this is something that we kind of were expecting based on the information that was coming out of the administration on what they really wanted to focus on. We know they wanted to focus on symmetrical speeds and high speeds, and also municipalities, so we see that here. The federal government previously noting these must deliver symmetrical speeds of 100 megabits per second to be eligible for funding, unless this is impracticable. I had to look that up. This is new on me. I've always heard of the word impractical, but impracticable is a little bit different. It means that it's not really possible based on what you can do. Whereas in practical means, it doesn't make sense. It's not something that you'd probably do because it doesn't make sense. In this case, you just can't do it. In which case, the requirement drops to 100 megabits per second and 20 megabits per second down. Fresh instructions released by the Department of the Treasury will explicitly encourage states to prioritize investments in fiber optic infrastructure where feasible, as such advanced technology better supports future needs. And interestingly, the guidelines also urge states to pursue projects that involve broadband networks owned, operated, or affiliated with local governments, nonprofits, and cooperatives, providers with less pressure to generate profits and with a commitment to serving entire communities. And we knew that was coming as well. That was something that was mentioned by the Biden administration when they kind of laid out their outline of what all this was going to look like. They said they were moving in this direction. They wanted providers that wouldn't feel the pressure to make a profit. Of course, you're going to hear from others that are in the business to make a profit that that's not really fair. If the government is subsidizing or favoring these entities that don't have to make a profit, it makes it hard for the private companies to then get involved. So it really could have the opposite effect of decreasing choice if you do that, if you make it anti-competitive, let's say, to providers that are not co-ops or municipalities. The department explained costs eligible for funding, and there's a lot involved here, include the repair, rehabilitation, construction, improvement, and acquisition of equipment or infrastructure, feasibility studies and other data gathering, personnel costs for staff and consultants required to carry out a project, and ancillary expenses needed to put capital project to its best use, such as costs required to boost broadband adoption or digital literacy. So even promoting the broadband, in other words, trying to get more people to adopt broadband that are not already broadband customers, could be covered under these funds. Costs associated with the acquisition of spectrum licenses and operating expenses are not covered, and that's interesting, especially the spectrum licenses, because again, they seem to be putting the thumb on the scale toward fiber. So, they therefore are not saying that they would fund spectrum licenses for those that maybe want to do 5G. And then operating expenses would not be covered, so just the day-to-day operating expenses. But all this stuff as far as setting it up, feasibility studies, determining if it's something that you should even do in your area, all those things are covered. Just not operating costs, and then if you have to acquire spectrum. As one might expect, yes, the Treasury spotlight on fiber technology drew praise from the Fiber Broadband Association. So obviously, Fiber Broadband Association is set up to help lobby for fiber providers and to help promote that, and they would obviously be very happy. I'm sure WISPA, the Wireless Service Provider Association, is not happy, and that we'll be hearing from them. On the fiber side, Frontier plows ahead with XGS-PON, that's 10 gigabit per second symmetrical PON. And I actually did a Tech Tuesday about this last week with Nokia. And this is about Nokia right here. So I will post a link in the comments when I'm done with the broadcast about that. I think you'd find that very interesting because we talked about XGS-PON, we talked about GPON, and if you're a service provider, which way do you go? And you actually don't necessarily need to make a hard and fast decision that will lock you out, because with Nokia, for example, you can deploy XGS-PON and support GPON at the same time. So I'll put a link to that here down below. So it says Frontier Communications has hooked up with Nokia to connect about 100,000 homes to XGS-PON technology, a move that puts the telco on a path to eventually deliver symmetrical 10 gigabit per second broadband services. Nokia noted that the deployment uses products powered by Quillion, the company's family of in-house silicon that is focused on multiple generations of broadband technology, including low latency 5G transport. And we talked about that. I talked about that last week with Chris Tucker from Nokia, their Quillion chipset, which is something that's kind of unique in that they are the developers of that compared to maybe other providers that use other people's chipsets. So I think it's Bell Labs that they own that does that. Frontier currently offers a symmetrical 1 gig service and has announced that it intends to introduce a 2 gig service over fiber to the premise in early 2022. This is a big step forward for our fiber expansion plan, which will reach 600,000 new locations by the end of this year and a targeted 10 million locations by the end of 2025. So that is big for them because they've been really behind. They've really suffered because most of their broadband network has been DSL based, and they've seen a lot of people leaving their service because of that, because they can't get the speeds that they need. I think if I recall, they had come out of bankruptcy, if I'm remembering correctly, hopefully so. So, this will be something that will help get them back in line if they can get up to 10 million locations by the end of 2025. Now, AT&T had been forecasting 30 million fiber locations, and they're saying that might be too low. This was in a conversation with their CEO. There might be a business case for AT&T to deploy fiber to more than the 30 million locations that the company has forecast to have fiber broadband available to them by 2025, especially if the Senate infrastructure bill becomes law, said AT&T CEO John Stankey at an investor conference. There's more that we could possibly attack, he said. Stankey added that he had put that out as a challenge to the management team to say, the only thing that stands in the way between you doing 30 million and doing more is your execution and performance. There would be that and getting access to with supply chain issues right now and people available to install fiber. There's shortages in some of these areas, so that's been kind of putting a little bit of a damper on the fiber network market, I should say. And we'll have to see how that impacts people. But they're saying, the funds could make a big difference, at least as far as having the money to do it. He says, I think there's possibly places that we can go where we haven't defined the model, he said. Things are changing around us, and we can possibly do something either with partners or under different models where it may not look like an effective return today, but circumstances may change that, in fact, make it an effective return. Again, more money. Another impending development could be the fiber deployment business case. That could impact the fiber deployment business case, according to Stankey, is the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act that passed the Senate and will become law if adopted by the House and signed into law by the President. So this is more money, not just the one that we were talking about, the COVID relief, American recovery, the $10 billion. This would be more in this infrastructure package. So there's lots of money that's out there and even more that could be coming. If that happens, Stankey said, it will change the landscape of the broadband business in this country. And it will also change my posture and point of view of where we should be playing as a company. And as a result of that, I would lean into it. And I'd probably be coming back to you and say 30 isn't the right number. So AT&T is looking at 30 as a minimum now, as far as the number of subscribers they'll have up on fiber, additional subscribers by 2025. And Verizon, who also plays in the fiber market, is also talking about fixed wireless. So again, fixed wireless does not seem to be where this latest money, this $10 billion that's out there now, is being focused as far as the government, again, kind of leaning toward fiber in some ways. But Verizon is looking at fixed wireless as the next generation of broadband themselves, because they've been investing in 5G, specifically millimeter wave 5G. So their CEO, Hans Vestberg, highlighted continued momentum in its Fios business, but pointed to fixed wireless access as a key tool in its quest to expand its broadband reach further and faster. Speaking during a Goldman Sachs investor conference, he explained that Fios and its 4G, 5G fixed wireless access products are part of a patchwork solution the operator is leveraging to deliver a full nationwide broadband offering. He added, FWA gives the operator an opportunity to serve up broadband to its sprawling base of wireless customers outside its ILEC footprint. So they're not just looking at fiber where they are an ILEC, an independent local exchange carrier, but just outside of that network where they have wireless towers, they can provide high-speed broadband internet using 5G. So we're going to have different solutions depending on the customer, but ultimately our goal is that we're going to address the full market of broadband, and we think that there are definitely underserved parts where we can come very strongly with our fixed wireless access. We can come quicker, he said. It's the next generation of broadband. That's how we see it. So they already have towers up. Well, actually, they're doing millimeter wave, so they've actually got to put up microcells. So they probably are going to have to do some build out. But I guess they're saying that it's quicker and easier to put up some of these microcells in urban areas than it is maybe to lay fiber, maybe in areas where they're not an ILEC, than it would be to try to become an ILEC from that standpoint and lay fiber, I guess is what he's saying. So. And that is the path that they're taking. It says they're now live in parts of 57 cities, covering 48 states. So they are moving ahead on that. And as far as how that's working, here, this is interesting. So this is Sue Marek. She's a contributing editor at Fierce Wireless, and she has tried out the 5G service. She was curious about that. She says, I've been a remote worker either full-time or part-time for the past 20 years, and during that time I've relied heavily on my cable company to provide my broadband connection so that I can do my work, and for the most part I've been a satisfied customer. Then she mentions the pandemic. She says, but like many remote workers, the COVID-19 pandemic made me much more reliant on Zoom and other video conferencing tools to connect with clients and interview subjects. Because I was home a lot more than in the past, I also started exploring new entertainment options like streaming live performances from some of my favorite bands. I quickly learned that my broadband connection, which up until now had been adequate for my research and writing, was not adequate for these new video-intensive tasks. More often than not, I experienced glitches and delays. Now, it would be interesting to note, or I should say know, if that was related to her cable connection or was that related to her in-home Wi-Fi. Because quite often when somebody's complaining about issues with their broadband connection, it's not necessarily the broadband provider, it's the in-home wireless network. Maybe the router's not in the right place. They've got it placed near something that's causing interference. So don't know, but it would be interesting, if she was thinking that was the provider and maybe it was her home Wi-Fi network. She said, I've been closely watching Verizon's rollout of its 5G home fixed wireless broadband service in my Denver neighborhood. I was thrilled when I saw one of the Verizon's green 5G towers installed just a short distance away. I can see the top of that Verizon tower from my backyard. And that's key with Verizon service because they are using millimeter wave. And because of that, you have to have line of sight. It's got to be fairly close. And she says she can see that tower from her backyard. Sounds like it took about 6 months to get to her. She says after about 6 or 5 months, she received a Verizon flyer in the mail touting 5G home and received a call from a 5G home sales rep a few days later telling me that the service was definitely available and I could get it installed within a week. She says the most difficult part of the process was deciding where to install the router. It has to be installed on a window, preferably with direct line of sight to the tower. I think preferably it's got to be with direct line of sight of the tower, or it's not going to be very good, I think. We decided on my laundry room window at the rear of my house, which is probably about 250 feet away from the tower. And there's actually a picture up here. I'm going to scroll back up. So this is the antenna. So this is her laundry room right here. And you can see it's on the window. And in this case, maybe the line of sight that she's talking about, it could be, they do have some two-piece units where part of it's on the inside of the window and part of it's on the outside of the window. And maybe that's where you have a wire running somewhere else to an antenna if you want it installed on a different window possibly that doesn't have line of sight. But in this case, you can see that, one issue I see here, this might be the tower back here. Can't really see it, but you see a bunch of trees. And while she may have line of sight, these trees may be an issue, but that's what it looks like. It's fairly big. It sits there on the window, and you see the wire coming inside right there. So I'm thinking this is the antenna here, and then maybe that's the patch antenna, and maybe that goes to a router. I thought maybe this was the router, but maybe not. So haven't seen one of these other than that. Says it was installed inside my window and then plugged into, maybe that's just a plug to go into to plug it in. So installed inside my window and then plugged into a nearby outlet. The device has Wi-Fi 6 and an Ethernet port. So maybe that is both the antenna and the router there. And it's got Wi-Fi 6, which is good because if you're going to have this really fast internet coming into your home, it's good to have Wi-Fi 6, which can provide really fast internet inside the home. She says I'm eligible for a network repeater, which will take the signal, amplify it, and retransmit it to areas of my house, but I declined because I can get coverage everywhere in my home without it. And the speeds look really good. She says, ugly white box aside, I've had my Verizon 5G home service a little over a week now, and the network speeds have been far superior to what I was getting before. When I'm close to the router, I've logged speeds as high as 1.7 gigabits per second down and 25 megabits per second up. In my home office, which is on the other corner of the house and far away from the router, I still get speeds around 350 megabits per second down and 14 meg up. So she's seeing quite a bit of difference there on different sides of the house due to just the distance and probably going through walls, those kinds of things. So, and I'm wonder if she's got, I'm not sure about those speeds, if she would have, she may not have a Wi-Fi, let's say 6 gigahertz capable devices that she's using, because you can get really fast speeds from Wi-Fi 6, especially if you've got Wi-Fi 6G, which I think it's 6G is what it's called, which gives you the 6 gigahertz speeds. She says, I've had a few blips in my coverage and experienced a couple of signal drops, but it's only lasted a few minutes and hasn't caused me too much grief. However, I'll continue to monitor it. So that could be those trees. windy days, rainy days, or even humidity. Millimeter wave, so it's very fast, but it attenuates very easily. So even humidity in the air can cause some issues. And if it were to rain, it'd be interesting to know what would happen with all of those leaves and rain drops on those leaves. Pine trees are particularly bad with Wi-Fi because it seems like the distance that you have on pine needles and you get some rain in between there, it can really cause issues. Those look just like regular deciduous trees, and I'm assuming in the winter when those leaves drop, it'll get better for her if that's causing an issue. Price of the service is another plus. It costs just $50 per month for Verizon wireless customers and $70 per month for everyone else. Unlike my cable provider, Verizon doesn't charge a router rental fee, so I don't have that extra cost, and I don't have a service contract. Those are two big pluses. So if you don't have to pay that monthly router fee, if the service operator is confident in the service and they feel like you're going to stay with the service, they don't have to do that, and then they don't have to lock you into a contract. That's nice. So you feel comfortable making the switch. And I think people are going to have to feel comfortable making the switch if they have reasonably good wired service and they want to look at another broadband provider like a 5G. They're probably not going to want to have to go to a long-term commitment unless they're really unhappy, really unhappy with their provider. So the company hasn't been heavily marketing the service here, and none of my neighbors were aware that there was another broadband choice in the neighborhood. So she just happened to see the antenna, happened to get a flyer and a call. So it sounds like it's working okay for her now, but that's only been after a week, so I guess, like she said, she'll keep an eye on that. Now, T-Mobile also touting their 5G service. It's a different 5G service, different kind. They added 51 fixed wireless home internet markets. They've expanded their 5G home internet service to 51 markets across Florida, Georgia, North Carolina, and South Carolina. Some customers will see average download speeds of more than 100 megabits per second, and the minimum average speed will be at least 25 megabits per second, depending on location, signal strength, and availability, time of day, and other factors, T-Mobile said. So you can see the difference right there. So again, Verizon is using millimeter wave, which is very short range, highly attenuated, need line of sight, but very fast. So she was talking about well over a gig service, whereas here they're talking about 100 megabits per second. This is using mid-band spectrum. So you're talking about spectrum for millimeter wave, I think in the 30 to 40 gigahertz range versus mid-band spectrum in the 3 to 4 gigahertz range. So this spectrum is not as fast, but it goes further. You don't have to worry so much about line of sight. It goes through walls, that kind of thing. So T-Mobile is selling this like they would mobile service, except they're selling it as a fixed wireless offering. When T-Mobile initially launched home internet, it used the company's LTE network, but since then, the carrier launched a 5G version of the offering in some markets, and that would be using that mid-band spectrum and doing 5G versus 4G. For a limited time, people signing up for home internet will get $10 off for life, the company said. The regular price is $60 a month with autopay, so you can get it for as low as $50, compared to $70, it sounds like, for the Verizon offering. I'm assuming this is for somebody that doesn't, like there's not a T-Mobile discount for people that have T-Mobile's regular cell service, but I don't know. And you can see some of the markets here. So again, they can expand much more quickly. They're calling this nationwide 5G, although it may be LTE in lots and lots of areas. So this is maybe more of the expansion of the real 5G service using the mid-band spectrum. So you can see here that Florida, Georgia, North Carolina, South Carolina. So when they hit an area, they are not just hitting. Verizon basically focuses on more urban areas because of the fact that it's line of sight. You have to have lots of cell towers, and they could be just on they're small cells, so they could be on light poles or other small, the size of buildings. It doesn't need to be a big tower. But they need to be close to each other. You need to have line of sight to where your customer is. Where in this case, you can have the higher towers and you can be hitting a lot bigger area, just not nearly as fast on the speeds. So that's the big difference between what they're doing. And not to leave cable out, Charter plots its DOCSIS 4.0 versus fiber strategy. So DOCSIS 4.0, that's the Cable Labs standard that it's not really it's not one standard as much as it's several different technologies that they're kind of putting together to make what they're calling 10G. I think DOCSIS 4.0 and 10G are pretty synonymous as far as the 10G meaning 10 gigahertz per second, 10 gigabits per second, excuse me. And Fort DOCSIS 4.0 kind of being the next phase. You've got DOCSIS 3.1 now and DOCSIS 4.0 being the next phase, although there's not nearly as big a jump between DOCSIS 3.1 and DOCSIS 4.0 as there was between DOCSIS 3 and DOCSIS 3.1. So, like I say, it's DOCSIS 4.0 borrows on some DOCSIS 3.1 stuff and some other things to allow operators to get up to 10 gigabits per second in symmetrical is what they're looking to do in order to compete with fiber, right? So we were just talking about XGS-PON, 10 gigabits per second, fiber, symmetrical. Well, this is kind of the answer to that. And as I talked with Nokia last week with Chris Tucker, 10 gigs is, they're not stopping there. They've got 25 gigs coming out and 50 gigs and 100 gigs that they've been playing with and testing. So it's going to be hard for DOCSIS to keep up, but in the meantime, this is a good offering for cable operators. So high split network upgrades are the more up-and-coming expenditure in parallel with DOCSIS 4 as Charter looks toward future CapEx plans, said Charter CFO Chris Winfrey in a conference. DOCSIS 4.0, the latest generation of cable industry broadband standards, is designed to support speeds up to 10 gigabits per second. Asked about his plans, Winfrey said, "Today we're doing a significant amount of physical and virtual node splits, except we're investing more in DOCSIS 3.1, and there's significant runway for capacity there. Node splits reduce the number of customers served from a network node and are one means of boosting the speeds that a broadband network can support." So they're focusing on DOCSIS 3.1. They're doing these node splits so that they have fewer customers per node. I'm sure they're pushing out with remote PHY, remote MAC-PHY to try to get the fiber and fiber nodes closer to the edge, closer to the end user. So all of these things are going to help them increase speeds. We're converting and will continue to convert into an MPEG-4 environment, more digital video, so we can reclaim bandwidth from our video network and reallocate it to broadband, all within the context of DOCSIS 3.1. Additionally, he said we will invest in high split markets where we think it's attractive to do so and maybe as a bridge to us transitioning to DOCSIS 4.0. So again, plowing kind of the investment in DOCSIS 3.1, looking ahead to DOCSIS 4.0 and how that 3.1 can help push them in that direction. As I say, as you push fiber close to the edge, that's part of what you need for DOCSIS 4.0, the remote MAC-PHY factor, for example. Charter high split upgrades. High split upgrades are designed to increase the broadband speeds that cable operators can provide, particularly on the upstream path, by devoting a greater portion of an operator's HFC infrastructure to the upstream path. This is accomplished using diplex filters. High split architectures use the portion of the link between 5 MHz and 204 MHz for upstream communications, while the portion of the link devoted to downstream communications begins at 258 MHz and may go as high as 1 GHz or higher. While Charter traditionally has used fiber to the home only for greenfield installations, including most of the company's rural broadband deployments, that could change moving forward, as Winfrey indicated that the company sees fiber broadband as a possible alternative to DOCSIS 4.0 in some cases. So you're going to be seeing this. A lot of cable operators have already been installing fiber to the home in areas where they don't already provide service. It's expensive to swap it out. If you're providing DOCSIS somewhere, you've got that last mile that's always expensive. You've got to take customers offline. You've got to replace all of that coax infrastructure. So they're doing this in greenfield installations, but he's saying they may at some point, rather than go to DOCSIS 4.0 in a market, maybe they do go to fiber. So you're going to be seeing this more and more, especially again as you get to the kind of the end of what you can do with coax on speeds. As fiber gets faster and coax maybe can't keep up. We'll see how that goes. Comcast is doing mid-splits. So Comcast focuses on mid-split to get to DOCSIS 4.0, stalls wireless infra plan. Comcast zeroed in on mid-splits as a key step on the path to next-generation capabilities as it works to accelerate its transition to DOCSIS 4.0, said CFO Michael Cavanaugh. We're going to deploy more node splits, sounds familiar, more fiber in the network, deeper in the network, he added. Our base case is to do what's called sort of mid-splits, which is least disruptive to our customers, leaves the equipment in their home unimpacted. So again, they're trying to do what they can in their existing cable plant, in this case using mid-splits, and again going fiber deep into the network to try to get more subscribers or fewer subscribers on a particular node and get more bandwidth to them. With the success of trialing 4.0, so they've tried it out, with the success of trialing 4.0 technologies in the last bunch of months, we really see that it's for real. We want to get ourselves on the path to doing that. Eventually, its implementation of DOCSIS 4.0 will give us multi-gig speeds up and down. And then here it talks about the difference between mid-split and high-split. So again, traditionally operators have used an upstream bandwidth of 5 megahertz to 42 megahertz. Implementation of a mid-split configuration would bump that range to 85 megahertz, while another option, high-split, which is what Charter is doing, will go even further to 204 megahertz. So you can see these larger MSOs are doing what they can to compete with fiber operators in their area to make sure that they can get higher speeds and hopefully symmetrical speeds to their customers. Again, from Charter's CFO here, programmers have made pay-TV unaffordable for many. He's saying distributors need to lower programming prices and/or increase flexibility to package channels, Chris Winfrey tells an investor conference. So kind of switching to pay TV here from strictly broadband, there's lots of changes going on there between pay TV and then getting your video via over-the-top TV or IPTV. You saw where Charter was talking about going to MPEG-4. So he's complaining about the programming prices, and he says the distributors need to lower that they're pricing themselves out of the market. He says the programmers have made this product unaffordable for a large part of the population. To the extent that programmers continue to increase their rates in a way that is higher than customers can afford, you're going to see continuing losses, maybe even accelerating losses of pay TV subscribers, he argued. Winfrey added that Charter is not actually able to pass through everything that is coming through us in terms of higher prices for programming. So cable operators are in a difficult position, any pay TV operator like this, because the content providers keep raising the rates on different channels, and they force them to take bundles of channels. If you want this one channel that everybody seems to want, you got to take these 3 or 4 other channels that maybe hardly anybody watches. So he'd like more flexibility there. Content giants have been affected by a dilemma. The programmers have not been able to get out of the prisoner's dilemma of taking the additional rate increases and insisting on carriage and forcing multiple channels and cross-bundling requirements, he said. Winfrey concluded that to help the health of the pay TV ecosystem, the sector would either need to lower programming prices and/or increased flexibility for distributors like Charter to package these products in a way that they can actually drive penetration. And then finally, this story kind of goes with that. NBCU warns YouTube TV subscribers they could be blacked out. YouTubeTV promises a $10 discount if NBCU programming is unavailable. So here, YouTubeTV, being a pay TV provider, but instead of being an MVPD, they are a vMVPD, multi-video programming distributor, or virtual multi-channel video programming distributor. So YouTubeTV is an over-the-top option that would compete with somebody like a Charter. So when somebody cuts the cord from Charter, they could go to somebody like YouTube, for example. Now, quite often they'll just go to several OTT providers. Like they would cut the cord with a cable operator like Charter, then they'll go get Netflix, maybe Amazon, maybe Disney, and they might round it out with maybe a free ad-supported television option like Tubi or something like that. But in this case, these are people that are signing up for something that's very similar looking to a Charter offering or a Comcast Xfinity offering with YouTube TV. NBC Universal is warning viewers that YouTube TV subscribers could be blacked out of NBCU programming because of a failure to renew their carriage agreement, setting up a battle between Comcast, interestingly enough, which owns NBCU, and Google, which owns YouTube TV. So just as the guy from Charter was complaining about, these costs going up and having to renegotiate, this is exactly what's happening here with YouTube TV. They're having to deal with that. Google said that if it gets equitable terms, it will renew its agreement with NBCU. Otherwise, subscribers will get a discount for the duration of a blackout, which could begin Thursday, which is brilliant on YouTube's part, because again, it's been really difficult for these pay TV providers, whether that be Charter, Comcast, which is kind of ironic here, Dish, DirecTV. You'll see these battles back and forth, and they kind of spin it. The programmers spin it, and the cable provider spins it, and they point fingers at each other. And in some cases, especially lately with some of the satellite operators, especially Dish, you could lose a channel for months, and everybody blames the other person. But it tends to be the video operator, the cable TV provider, the YouTube TV that takes the heat, because they have the direct relationship with the subscriber. So they're the ones generally that take the heat. So I think these programmers feel like, well, we can go ahead and we can raise rates, and they will eventually give in, because their customers will complain so much, they'll be taking most of the heat. Now, of course, the PayTV provider tries to point the finger back at the content provider and says, hey, it's their fault, but again, they are the ones taking most of that heat from the subscriber because they have the relationship with them. So there's a few interesting things in here. Again, I think this is brilliant. So NBCU also noted that the timing would be particularly bad for viewers who would miss the start of a new fall primetime season and the early part of the NFL season. So NBCU, again, is trying to raise the stakes here and saying, you don't want to do this to your customers. It's bad timing, probably bad timing on purpose. Maybe they're doing it because of the start of the NFL season, and it's like, this is when we have the most leverage against YouTube, so we'll do it then. But YouTube fired back. And they said, if NBCU offers us equitable terms, we'll renew our agreement with them. However, if we're unable to reach a deal by Thursday and the NBCU lineup of channels is no longer available on YouTubeTV, then we'll decrease our monthly price by $10 from $64.99 to $54.99 while this content remains off our platform. And then this is really funny. You can sign up for NBC's own direct-to-consumer streaming service, Peacock, which they offer for $4.99 a month to continue watching NBCU content such as Sunday Night Football. So they're saying basically, if we lose this, we're going to give you, Mr. Subscriber, $10 off on your service. And you can go pay $5 to Peacock and then really get all of that service. What they'd be missing would be local NBC content, and there might be a few other things that they're missing, but they're saying even the football stuff they'd be able to get. So this puts a lot more leverage on YouTube, because basically what they're saying is, we're going to give our customers a discount. We're going to make it look really bad for you, because not only are they getting a price decrease, but then if you decide to come back to YouTube, we're going to have to raise their price again. And who's going to get blamed for that? Well, YouTube's going to get some blame, but they're also going to be able to point the finger at NBC and say, well, these guys are one of the reasons that your costs are so high. So I think it's kind of a brilliant move. I think it makes it less likely that NBCU is going to hold out as long as they might otherwise. It says, while we would love every member to continue to stay with our service, we understand that you may still choose to pause or cancel your membership. We want to make YouTube TV flexible so members can pause or cancel anytime. We will give you updates as negotiations continue. And that's another thing that YouTube has over somebody like a Charter or a Dish quite often, because those pay TV providers quite often do have contract agreements or basically contractual agreements with their subscribers, where you sign up for a defined period of time and you get a low price, and then when that agreement is up, they bump your price way up, and then you have to call them and complain and say, okay, well, you can sign up for another year, another 2 years, and we'll bring it back down to that price. Well, with YouTube and some of these other providers like this, you go month to month. So they're saying, you can drop off if you need to, and you can come back when we get NBCU back, or just go to Peacock and pay $5 a month. We're giving you $10 off, so you're actually still saving $5. Now, it's interesting because part of what NBCU is trying to do, I was talking about how they restructure these deals where you got to take these bundles. So they are trying to get YouTube to take Peacock, this other streaming service where you could get there from YouTubeTV, and that's part of what they're trying to do. I think that's part of what YouTube is objecting to. And then also YouTube wants what's called most favored nation status, where they get the same kind of pricing that other big operators would get. And I think that is something that they're not getting from NBCU, and they want to get that. So they really, at this point, they're a pretty big player. They actually just passed Hulu. They've got 4 million subscribers now, so they just passed Hulu and now are the biggest I can't even ever say that. They're the biggest vMVPD out there, virtual multi-channel video distributor. So they're the biggest out there now. They just surpassed Hulu, so they've got a lot of leverage there. And I think what they're doing here, again, is kind of a brilliant move to kind of turn the tables on NBCU, and we'll see how that goes. I predict that NBCU will blink. We'll have to see, but based on this, if they know that the subscribers are going to be getting a $10 discount and they might not miss their programming, that's a big deal. So we'll see how that plays out. So, all right, well, that's it for today. Hopefully this was helpful for you and kind of brought you up to speed on what's going on. Again, next week, don't miss it. If you are interested in DOCSIS proactive network maintenance, I will be talking about the latest version of our DOCSIS P&M tool and showing you what that looks like, some of the changes. So if you're a cable provider, you should find that very interesting. Thanks for joining me. I will be here next week with that on Tech Tuesday at 3 o'clock. See you then. Bye-bye.